up to speed. We started our guide to how to be a soul flowing most efficiently through a body. And chapters 1 to 8, we learned all about the whole dynamic of our two souls, what the components are of the two souls, how they even interact in some cases. 9 and 17, we learned how to manage the interaction between the two souls and learned a system of meditation where we meditate intellectually to create emotions of fear and love that elevate all of the environment around us. Chapters 18 to 25, we learned a second technique where we're not creating emotions, we're revealing a love that's already hidden within us, a very powerful love that can get us to function efficiently and be high functioning in any scenario, any situation. And then finally, once we had our system down pat, information, relationship between the souls, and then two systems of how to manage that relationship to be a peak functioning individual, a Beinoni. And then we learned how to get anything out of the way that might hamper our functioning in this system of trying to be a Beinoni. That was chapters 26 to 34, which is all about joy and how to get anything out of the way, physical, spiritual, otherwise, that is in the way of your joy, and how to amp up joy to the fullest, knowing how powerful joy is to function in the system. Then finally, we got to chapter 35, where we started talking about the mashal, the example of a lamp, where we say that we are actually like a lamp. Our physical body is the wick. The light of the Shekhinah, the light of God's presence, is the flame above us. And the oil that's flowing that allows that flame to be clear and bright and burn a long time is actually the physical mitzvahs that we do. So here we are. If you've been in a sukkah, anything you do in a sukkah is just pouring that oil into your lamp, beautiful, clear oil, no matter what you're doing in the sukkah, but especially waving a lulav, an etrog. And although they look like they're physical objects, I have a beautiful etrog here. I'm so, thank God, I kept the pitom in so far. Look at that lovely thing. It looks like just another piece of fruit that you might make a jam out of. But in fact, because when you look at this etrog on Sukkot, you just see godliness, God's ratzon. That's what God wants, is for me to hold this etrog and wave a lulav and etrog. Now, that is completely nullified and has no identity of its own, and that has the holiness to serve as oil to let the Shekhinah dwell. So all these mitzvahs that we do all through the year, but certainly at this time, when we're in our sukkahs, that is the oil that causes this light to glow bright, and that creates a surrender, as we said, to God that goes beyond even what the soul of a tzaddik can do when it's in heaven, experiencing the highest peak of love and awe of God. Because a soul is still a separate soul, but a physical mitzvah is completely surrendered. It's completely transparent, and we can function like the patriarchs and matriarchs. We can function like a chariot and bring God's light down into reality. The energy that we use to actually shake it actually becomes absorbed in the divine light entirely. And we even draw a ray from that light onto our physical body itself that surrounds us in an encompassing manner. So just a powerful, powerful lens for how someone like us, who likely will never be able to be a tzaddik, can recognize what we do is even more important than the love and awe of a tzaddik, that we're bringing true surrender to the Ein Sof. And now, any questions about that? I'm hoping not. That was fast. No comments yet. And now, here we are, and we want to start chapter 36. And chapter 36, as I've said, it really is a drum roll chapter. It really is the core chapter of the entire of the system that we're learning, which is Chabad Hasidus. So the system of Kabbalah as expressed by the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya. This is the core of what it's all about. It's the most bedrock idea, and also where the Baal Shem Tov introduced many, many novelties, and people were outraged that he'd say a peasant who's farming potatoes might be as holy as a yeshiva, brilliant genius, learning Gemara 18 hours a day. What a crazy idea, and many other novelties. This novelty of the Baal Shem Tov was really brought out and focused on and expanded in the Tanya, in a way that also turned heads and was completely radical, as you'll see. And the idea is that the whole purpose of creation, the whole reason we're here, the whole, you know, why am I alive? Why am I struggling? Why anything? Is to create a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God, not in the heavenly realms, but in the tachtonim, in the lowest, very lowest place in creation. And where is that? The physical world. So for anyone who maybe new who's watching, we've learned about the structure of reality according to Kabbalah. First, there was just God, just Ein Sof, nothing else. And by the way, that's still the case from the Ein Sof's perspective. It's just infinity, undivisible. There's nothing else here. We know that. But then, for whatever reason, which we'll explore, the Ein Sof said, let there be a creation, and this very spiritual world was created that's barely even a creation. It's just an emanation called Atzilus. But that light was so bright, you couldn't have a physical creature like me, or even an angel like you'd have in one of the other worlds. So God screened that whole light and said, let's create another world called Bria, where you could have something you could really call a separate thing, because that still doesn't exist in Atzilus. It's too spiritual. So in Bria, the only thing that exists is the concept, the abstract concept that there can be anything separate from God. But that's it. What that thing is, nothing to do with there. They don't know what you're talking about, right? It doesn't have structure. It doesn't have form. It just has the potential to be something created. But now you can't have me in that world either, because I'm definitely more physical than that. So that was all screened and blocked. The light was blocked, and the impression of that light created another world, which is called the world of formation, Yetzirah, and that was blocked, and another world was created called the world of action, Asiya. And at the very bottom of that fourth tier of worlds, and in each tier there's infinite worlds within it, God went through all that trouble to block the light, until finally we get to the bottom of creation, the Tachton, and that is this physical world where really there's no residue of the light left at all. And so we look around and we see a physical fruit instead of seeing godliness, right? So it's only here in this world that this fruit, it's not apparent, that it is godliness. We talked about light at the end of the last chapter. There's beautiful light coming into my sukkah right now. It's gorgeous. And one thing Kabbalah taught us when it introduced the metaphor of light instead of shefa, flux, flow, is that something that's flowing is actually still related, it's pulling from its source, right? But then once it flows, it can flow into something, and I turn the tap on, I get a cup of water, and now I have the cup of water. It can be separate. So shefa implies there could be any separation possibly between the flow and the source. But does anyone on this call think that these beautiful beams of light that are falling on my sukkah, I could fold up the fabric, catch the beam of light inside, take it inside, and then open it up and now watch the beam of light in a nice dark room? What's wrong with that picture? Right? Could I reach up and grab some of the light, hold it in my hand, and put it in my pocket and save it for tonight when it's going to be dark? What's wrong with that picture? So what do we know about light? If there's light, that means there is a source of the light. And the light is just about the source. That's all it is. As a ray of light, it means as a source. It's always connected. It's just a part of it. And nothing is taken from the source. The source is what it is. If I shut my window or open it, the source is still there. So the spiritual worlds, that's what they're like. You look at them and they're like a ray of light, and it's evident to every being in that world above us that there's a source. I mean, of course, how could you have a ray of light without a source? You can't have the world of Atzilus without the Ein Sof. You can't have the world of Bria without the Ein Sof. And everything in that, it's obvious. They know it. And that's why that's not the Tachtonim, the lowest place where God wants to have a home. Because there it's obvious. It's only down here in the lowest world where finally everything was blocked out, where we don't feel like we're just a ray of light, so there must be a source. We feel like, I'm a me, right? I exist. Isn't it? What's making me? I don't know, maybe something subtle if I meditate, it seems like it, but that's in the background, right? But really, my main reality, it's the physical world, and it exists on its own. That's it. So the key concept of this chapter is that the whole purpose of life is to create a home for God, not in the spiritual worlds, not even in my divine soul, which is already godly, but actually in my animal soul and actually in my body and in the physical world around me. And that's the whole point of reality. And it actually turns everything on its head, because now, if that's the case, as we'll see, most people think, what's special about me? What makes Cantor Smolash special? Obviously, it's my divine soul. It's a piece of God, and then I learned a little bit of Torah, and that's shining in my mind, and I do good things, and that good side of me, that's what makes me special, right? I mean, I have cravings maybe, and I have a temper perhaps, and I have bad habits maybe, but that's not what makes me special. That, I'll write it off, I'll work on it tomorrow. What makes me special is my divine soul. Just the opposite, says the Alter Rebbe. What makes you special is God created the world to create a home in the Tachtonim. And what makes you special is that you're a Tachton, you're a low being, you're a coarse being. And the fact that you have the potential and you have a side of yourself that behaves poorly, it's that is the most special thing about you, because it's there that God wanted to have a home. And that's what God thought of before creation even started. And that's the whole reason why creation is here. So we're not special because of our godly soul. We're special because of our animal soul and because of our negative side. We have to struggle with it. We don't give into it. If I give into my negative side, now I haven't fulfilled the reason. But it's only that makes me special, because making a home for God in my divine soul, that's pretty self-evident, right? Hi, Sam. Good to have you watching, Sam. Let me know any comments or thoughts. So before we dive inside, any questions or thought about the scope of the chapter as a whole? Noreen, you look like you have a question. You're getting ready for something, no? I can't hear you yet. You gotta unmute.
I'm trying to write it all down.
Oh, okay, good. All right, let's dive in.
What does Tachton mean again?
Tachton means low, depths, lowest place, the bottom. Oh, my dad told me a joke that I thought would be good last week, but I forgot to tell it, so I'll tell it now. What was it? Oh, it wasn't my dad. Oh yeah. Speaking of, it doesn't really relate to this chapter anymore, but it was funny. So this student comes home from school, and he says to his mom, Mama, I got a part in the school play. His mother says, well, Moishela, tell me, what's your part? And Moishela says, I got the part of a Jewish husband. And his mother says, Moishela, you go back and tell your teacher you want a speaking part. Funny. So I'm sorry I do all the talking. I'm not in my normal role here, but there you go. So 36, we are in the Tanya on page 483 in this. If you're watching later online, I usually put up a link so you can find it online as well. והנה מודעת זאת, מאמר רבותינו זכרונם לברכה, שתכלית בריאה העולם הזה הוא שנתאווה הקדוש ברוך הוא להיות לו דירה בתחתונים.
In a well-known statement, our rabbis declare that the purpose for which this world was created is that the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to have an abode in the lower realms.
So this is Midrash. This is from Midrash, from Tanhuma, right? So it's not like a line from the Torah. It's it's part of the Midrash. It's a source, but certainly it's not it's not the Shema, right? It's not the Song of the Sea. This is part of Midrash. And in fact, the fact that an entire approach to reality, a whole philosophy, has been built really on this Midrash, some people in the frum world have complained about it. The last Rebbe of this system actually got a message from one of his Hasidim who was visiting a non-Hasidic community, and they said, they recognized the greatness of this last Rebbe. They said, why does the Rebbe, they had a few complaints, but the main complaint was, why did you build an entire system on this one obscure Midrash? And in fact, one of the previous Rebbes, the Rebbe Rashab, oh, we got someone waiting here. Let me let them in. The Rebbe Rashab wrote a whole hemshich, a whole series talking about that exact question. It was a long, long series, and he went through all the different purposes for reality that were offered in Judaism, because there's many places in the literature where the rabbi said, "This is why God created the world." For instance, it's the nature of chesed, of benevolence, to give. It's the nature of loving kindness to be loving kind. So because God is kind, God had to create a world because that's God's nature. God had to give. And how are you going to give without a world? You got to make a world to give. It makes perfect sense, right? I mean, why wouldn't we say that's the reason we should organize our lives around? Another one is that if something exists in the potential, it can't go unrealized within God. If something within God there's a potential, it can't just sit there unrealized. It has to be realized. So the fact that God could create, God had to at some point create, right? I guess it's the opposite of what can go wrong will go wrong. Or in this case, what can go right will go right eventually. So that's good too, right? I mean, that's offered too. This is not the only place in Judaism where Midrash or the rabbi said, this is why God created the world, to create a dira betachtonim, an abode in the lower realms. But the Rebbe Rashab went through and he showed all the other reasons that were offered. They explained why a world would be created, maybe a spiritual world, whichever one, but they didn't explain why all the way down to the tachtonim, all the way down to the physical world where God seems not present. It's only this explanation from Judaism that God wanted an abode in the very lowest realm that explains why God had to go all the way down here to physical reality, and God couldn't stop at Atzilus and say, good, I'm bestowing, I created, I fulfilled my creative urge, and done. Why would I degrade it by making, less holy creatures, less spiritual creatures per se, let's say. And what is it that is special about a home? What is it that is special about a home? How are we, when we are in our homes, that is different than anywhere else? And let's talk about that ourselves. Then if you're with us online, Ruth, hi. How are you in your home that is different than where you are anywhere else? Let me ask that question.
You're more comfortable. You're relaxed. It's familiar. You can be yourself.
You can be yourself. What does that mean? You can be yourself. I'm not me when I'm elsewhere. It's not myself. It's someone else.
Sometimes you have to be nice when you're outside.
Okay, there you go. It's like I started teaching this class and I said, I'm going to bring in Laibl Wolf. He's the most wise, most beautiful, most patient, most charismatic teacher, we have. And everybody's like, no, we don't want someone who's wise, patient, and charismatic. We want you. All right. So yeah, that's exactly it. When I'm anywhere else, there's a certain external aspect to how I'm behaving depending on where I am. If I'm at temple, I want to be my best self. If I'm with my kids at school, now I'm a parent. If I'm wherever I am, there's something I'm putting on. There's a role I'm taking on until I come home and I sit back and I relax. I take off the tie. And when I'm at home, I'm myself. I'm relaxed. I'm nothing else. Hasidus and Kabbalah would say what that means is that's your essence. That's your essence. So when you're at home, that's where you walk around in anything, you do anything, you're completely yourself. There's no filter. Hopefully yourself is a good thing, but that's you. You're your essence. Anywhere else, it's an external aspect of yourself. And that's what the Alter Rebbe means when he says God wanted a dira betachtonim. Of course, God's everywhere. So God's everywhere, it's done, right? There's something special. God can't, as we've learned, reveal anything of God's essence in any of the spiritual worlds. When God's in those worlds, because they're aware of God, they know they're flowing from God, God has to carefully shield and put on clothes and speak in a certain way and not get too excited because the angels will evaporate, right? God's always covered in all these veils and all this clothing just so those worlds can sustain the light that they're experiencing. So it's not God's essence. God's essence has to be carefully hidden in those worlds, like you and I might hide our essence when we go out to a public space, and we're very nice, but it's not my essence. It's a little different. Where is it that God can fully reveal God's essence? Not in any of the spiritual worlds. They'd all vanish They'd all evaporate if God's essence even was revealed for a moment. It's only here in the very lowest realm where all the light's blocked and there's no actual light. Here God can say, now I can show you my essence. Now I can show you my essence. And how does that happen? Physical mitzvahs. Physical mitzvahs that are completely united, as we learn, with God's ratzon. And why ratzon? Again, it's the same thing. It's like the essence. What is it about will that makes it so high and so essential to the Ein Sof or even to us? If I want something, there's a saying, if a taiva frek manish ken kashes, on a desire, on a will thing, you don't ask questions, right? I want, a network of this size. I could have a smaller one, but I want this one, right? Could I rationalize it? Yeah. But the wanting has nothing to do with my rational stance. Wanting is above intellect. Wanting is just me. If you want to know, if you want to know about someone, want to know what they think and what they feel. If you want to know who someone is, there you want to know what they want, because that's just above everything else. Because intellect and emotions, that's an aspect. That's aspect. But desire, that's who I am. That's the essence. So it's only down here in the physical world where we can make a home for God by bringing God's ratzon in the form of these mitzvahs that we learned are nullified. And if it happened, as Rabbi Levi of Barditchev said, if even one tzitzit for one of our talisim was revealed in heaven, all of heaven would evaporate. It can't handle anything of God's essence the way God does here in the physical world. Rick?
But surely before God in his sight, the distinction of higher and lower is not valid. One world is no higher than another, for he pervades all worlds equally. What then do our sages mean by saying that God desires an abode in the lower realms?
That's a first problem we're going to deal with. Isn't everything nullified and non-existent before God? Isn't the world all not here? And didn't we say the difference between the highest worlds and the lowest worlds? Everything is so infinitely far from God that we're all the same thing. There's no difference between the very highest spiritual world and the lowest world. It's all just non-existent to God. So how can you say God cares if God is in the higher world or lower world if there's no distinction between them? God's infinitely apart from all of it. Good question. Ele be'yorhenyan ki kodem shenivra holam haya hu levado yitbarech yachid miyuchad maleh kol hamakom hazeh shebara bo ha'olam. The explanation, let's do two chunks.
The explanation of the matter, however, is that God desired an abode in that realm considered lower within the ranks of the world as follows. Before the world, any world, was created, there was only he alone, one and unique, filling all the space in which he created the world. Anything that could be conceived of as a space or possibility for creation was filled with the Ein Sof, light.
So that's that surrender that we talked about that is obvious, is natural for a mitzvah object. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else besides God, and it's just transparent. So it's true. Before the world was created, I can picture that. No world, just God, God alone, God infinite, God indivisible. That I have no trouble sort of computing. If there's no world, there's no problem. V'gam ata ken hu lefanav yitbarech. In his view,
indeed, it is still the same now. Creation wrought with no change in his unity. He is one alone now, just as he was prior to creation.
Now that starts to blow my mind a little. Okay, well, God was alone then, God's alone now, so everything else, and now my physical brain has trouble, but that's natural. Don't be alarmed, right? But this is Ein od milvado. This is what the focus of Kabbalah is living our life, recognizing that everything's just surrendered to the infinite. There really is nothing else here. Yeah, and the more that's my lens, the more you could call a person, quote unquote, holy, right? רק שהשינוי הוא אל המקבלים חיותו ואורו יתברך.
The change applies only to the recipients of his vivifying force and his light before creation. Before creation, there was none to receive the divine life force and light. Creation brought into being these recipients.
Beautiful. By the way, a little housekeeping. I sometimes keep it on gallery mode, which, you know, when we broadcast later is a little boring. So if I do me a favor, anybody just kind of pipe up if I forget to go to speaker mode, so it's a little bigger for the readers, etc. Just kind of give me a potch, and I'll remember to do that. So this change of feeling like something exists is not just God. That only applies to me and you, and to created things. That doesn't apply to God. God's perspective still stands. God's not hidden from anything, or nothing's hidden from God, rather. God is everywhere. The whole universe exists within God. It has no reality whatsoever. There's only God. It's only the created beings that feel like they have some reality. שמקבלים על ידי לבושים רבים המכסים ומסתירים אורו יתברך. Paula, you can go ahead and unmute, please. We're at the bottom of 45. Who receive?
I thought I was behind somebody else. Who receive this life force and light by way of numerous garments, which veil and conceal God's light, for without such garments, they could not bear its intensity and would cease to exist.
Right, so all that divine light is veiled, and as we've learned, that's the definition of a world, is how much of the divine light is hidden. The word olam, ayin vav lamed mem, is related to helem, to concealment, and that's the definition of any world, is how much of divine light is concealed. If it's this quality and this amount, that defines that world. If I hid more of the light, now that would be a lower world, a different world. If I revealed more of the light, that would be a higher world. So the worlds are really a barometer of how much divine light's being hidden, and that's what defines the worlds to begin with. K'dichtiv ki lo yarani hadam v'chai.
I think it's me. So it is written, for no man can see me and live.
Yeah, and go on furthermore, not only man.
Furthermore, not only man, a physical being, but even spiritual beings, such as angels, are unable to receive the divine light and life force without concealing garments.
Right, so no creation, no man can see me and live. It seems like it's a punishment kind of thing. Oh, you know, if you see God, it'll be Raiders of the Lost Ark, and, you know, you're going to be struck down. But it's just pure spiritual physics. I think that I'm a real being. In fact, I'm a nothing. In fact, I don't exist. I'm a candle flame within, you know, one of the largest stars in the universe. There's no reality to me whatsoever. And if I saw God face to face, if I truly saw that reality, by definition, there'd be no me. I wouldn't be alive. I'd just be part of infinity. Not even part. You can't even say I'm part at that point. So it's not a threat. No man can see me and live. It's just a statement of that's the nature of infinity when it's relating to a supposedly created being. And the same goes for these worlds as well. As we said, if God's essence, God's absolute being that wants to create a home here in your life, in my life, in your heart, in my heart, if it were to expose itself for even a moment, like supercharged plutonium, it would just evaporate the whole spiritual world. God can only do it here in your life, in my life, in the physical world. V'chid fershu Rabbeinu zichronam livracha she'afilu malachim anikrim chayot ein ro'in chulu.
As our rabbis of blessed memory interpret the word Yahah and live, and this verse is referring to angels, thus even angels called chayot, holy. Chayot cannot see godliness except by way of garments which conceal him, thereby enabling them to receive his light.
So it's beautiful. The Hebrew is, right from the Torah, ki lo yarani hadam v'chai. no man can see me and live. The rabbis say, oh, v'chai also means and chayot, because chayot is one of the names of the angels. So they're saying it's not just saying people won't live if they see me. It's saying neither humans nor even angels can see me, especially because the angels, they're so aware of divine light, they'd evaporate. Well, we don't see it because we're blind to spirituality. So the essence can be right here, right around me, embracing me, and I'm still physically blind to it because I'm looking with my physical eyes. So the reason I don't see God's essence is different than the angels. The angels would see it and be gone. I can just pick it up and wave it around and go on about with my business and not realize that I just made a home for God here in the physical world, God's essence that can't even be revealed in Atzilus.
Cantor, is that why God clothes Adam and Eve when they go out from the garden?
It's related, right? Because in the Garden of Eden, they were completely innocent, and so in their essential state, they had no division, no shame. There's no physicality for them to get caught up in. Right. It was just part of their essence. And so, yeah, when they go out of the garden and they have to wear clothes, that's showing that now they're not innocent. It's not their essence anymore. Now they've got something else inside them. There's a struggle, and now there's superficiality that's introduced. Yeah.
And to be able to go out into the physical world, and be physical, they had to clothe their godliness, or clothe it in a physical manifestation or something.
I guess so, but the Garden of Eden is not seen as a completely non-physical place, right? I mean, it was seen as a part of the physical world, and they could have had a completely holy relationship with all of physical reality in that state if there hadn't been, the whole business with the tree. So I'm not sure I'd go that far, but definitely when they left Garden of Eden, they're dealing with a lower aspect of reality. That's true. And that's obviously part of the purpose of why so many years later, we're all here trying to fix everything. V'zehu inyan hishtalshlut ha'olamot v'yidatam mimadrega lemadrega. I'm not sure where we are. Was it? Who's reading? I've lost track. Dan, you read?
That was Joey.
Oh, yeah, Joey, go ahead. Are you with us? Yeah, why don't we go back to Cindy? I think Joey had a call. Or Rick. When I go to Rick, Cindy stepped away too. You got us, Rick?
Can I go?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
This concealment is the subject of the Hishtalshelut.
Good.
Really? The chain-like graded and downward succession of the worlds in their descent from level to level.
And we've talked about this. Hishtalshelut is related to chain. It's the cascading, I guess you'd say. But it's like links in a chain. So the way the world was created, and all the worlds, was the most spiritual light, and then the next world beneath it with less, and then less, and then less, and less. Each world feeds its remaining light, so to speak, down to the next one. It's not really like a waterfall, obviously, but there's some chain-like effect where the worlds are connected one to the other until finally you get to the bottom world. And that's, like we said, that's the whole subject. That's God concealing all that light, and certainly the essence, so that the next world can exist, which will be coarser and closer to physical reality. With
the many garments that conceal the light and the life force emanating from him. The more concealment, the lower the descent.
And so, as when we put on clothes, like we said, now it's not essential me, now it's some other me. I'm not in my pajamas anymore, right? I'm now in a suit or in a workout clothes or whatever I might be wearing. So as I put on clothes, I'm hiding more and more of myself. And the same with God. There's this infinite light that has to be concealed so a new world can come to be.
culminating in the creation of this physical gross world.
So this is what we described. This is where God wants to create a home, only in the physical world. And that's why in the last chapter we learned that mitzvot are that oil that lights up the flame above us, that allows the Shekhinah itself to dwell above us, because it's only mitzvahs that can bring God's complete essence into the world, because they're nullified to it, they're surrendered to it. And it can only happen in the physical world. And that's getting back again to why Judaism is so action-oriented, why every holiday is about do this, do that, don't walk here, do walk there, do say this, don't say that. Because we're dealing with creating a home for God's essence here in the lowest world. That's why the Alter Rebbe says the world was created. That's why you're here. That's the purpose of your whole life. And it's not that you have a divine soul that wants to connect with God and just has to get the animal soul out of the way. It's just the opposite. The whole point is that it's only the animal soul and the body that can do the physical mitzvahs that create a home for God here in the physical world. So the divine soul can't do it. The divine soul is not involved. It's involved, it's directing, but it's only the animal soul and the body that can pick up the physical etrog, that can put the physical coin, that can build the physical sukkah, that makes a home for God here in the lowest world. So in fact, that's the most special thing about me, is my lower aspects that I get to struggle with. And guess what? If you're one of those people that, you know, if people could see the screen inside and everything you're struggling with, you'd say, wow, that was that's a real that's a dark place that you go to sometimes. That's what makes you even more special, because you have the capacity to struggle with that side of yourself and transform that side of yourself and let the light we're discussing shine even in that lowest aspect of yourself. And that's the part of me that makes me the most special, that God's most excited about. Not my divine soul, that's a part of God, right? The new thing that God created, which is not light, but darkness. The new thing that exists in this world, total darkness, where there's no light left, and we shine a light into that and make a home for God's essence. Yes, Eleanor. You want to unmute?
Yeah. With that logic, my brain is saying, so a tzaddik cannot make that connection like we can make it.
I mean, a tzaddik can do mitzvahs, right? And a tzaddik has a physical body, so it's not like a tzaddik isn't making a home for God, but a tzaddik isn't doing it with the struggle that we have. So what's not involved with the tzaddik is, as we learned, is skafia and ishafcha, the really just putting the brakes on your animal nature and then transforming your animal nature. So even though a tzaddik is going to create a tremendous amount of light and still transform the world, I don't think many tzaddikim are watching my class and feeling disappointed that they're not part of it, so I don't have to say, going to give them kudos. But a tzaddik doesn't have a negative side anymore to struggle with, so no, a tzaddik actually can't do this. A tzaddik can make a home outside of themselves by doing mitzvahs, but they can't use their actual evil inclination to make a home for God and say, I really want to do this, and I'm not going to. And now I'm making a home in my own negative psyche for God. I'm tempted to do, I really don't want to do this, and I'm going to push myself to do this productive thing. Now I'm making a home for God in my own will, in my own psyche. And no, a tzaddik can't do that. That's our privilege. There's Vehu HaTachton. There's our word tachton again, right? It's the lowest. But madrega she'en tachton lamata mimenu b'inyan hetzker oro yitbarech v'choshech kaful mechufal.
This world is the lowest in degree. There is none lower than it in terms of concealment of his light, and no world compares with its doubled and redoubled darkness. Nowhere is God's light as hidden as in this world.
I'm not sure how many other spiritual pathways recognize this, and certainly the modern spirituality likes to see the world as just a place where if we just let love happen, everything will be fine. And we just have to turn to love, and the world is a perfect place, and leave everything be, and let everything be in harmony, and that ultimately that's all that the world needs. It's not a sense of struggling with the world and fighting with the negative side of the world. There's a sense that really if we just all love, then everything will be fixed, because that's how it's set up. Judaism says that's a mistake to think that. This is the very lowest place in reality. If I had to go to a garbage dump because I had lost something important, say I had lost a gem, I knew it was in a garbage dump and I had to go there and find it, would I wear my finest clothing? No, I know I'm in a dump, but there's going to be horrible smells and dirt and schmutz and maybe little animals and vermin, and I'm rummaging through to find this important thing, but I know where I am. I got to rummage through the garbage. I got to, maybe have a mask. I got to protect myself. I got to struggle with this garbage dump because that's where I am. Unfortunately, the way the world is created, we're actually in the garbage dump of reality. We're in the lowest place where there's no more divine light at all. There's all this klipa, there's all this negativity, and it's there for us to struggle with it. But if we decide, just peace and love is all the world needs, now I've showed up to the garbage dump in my fine wedding clothes, and I'm rummaging through. I don't even realize where I am. So we as practitioners need to recognize this is the lowest aspect of reality. There's nothing below here, right? Even this idea of Gehenna. Gehenna is not a place that's less spiritual than the physical world. The physical world is the bottom. Gehenna is the wash and dry cycle for later. We won't get into it. So we are here in the lowest place where it's completely doubled and redoubled darkness. And stam, because we're here, that's where we can create a home for God's essence. Amazing to think how radical this was. This idea has gotten legs and has influenced many, many streams of Judaism. But until the Alter Rebbe said this, of course, it was all about holiness. It was about Torah study. It was about elevating yourself. It was about your divine soul. That was the purpose. Your evil inclination was something to bash or destroy or belittle. Now we're learning my evil inclination is what makes me special. That's the purpose of reality. Struggling with that creates a home for God, and that's why the whole creation was made. Whoa. Now perhaps I approach my personality and my refinement with a very different attitude. So
much so that it is filled with kilopot and Sitra Ahara, which actually oppose God, saying, I am and there is nothing else besides me.
That also is a feature only of this lowest physical world. As we said, every angel understands it's just flowing out of divine light. It's completely connected to divine light. It's only us that could say, here I am, that's all there is, physical world. והנה, תכלית השתלשלות העולמות וירדתם ממדרגה למדרגה אינו בשביל עולמות העליונים. We're at... The
purpose of the histalshalut of the worlds and of their descent from level to level is not for the sake of the higher world.
So you might say, well, hold on. I know there's a lower world, but really, when God created a world, which world did God want? The world with Smolash, where he was going to mess up and make mistakes, or the world of Atzilus, where there's only emanated angels that do everything perfectly, that are in perfect love and awe of God, that see God's light. Of course, God wanted to create the holy worlds. That's the point of creation. And maybe you could say God needed the lower worlds just so the holy worlds would look better, right? You need contrast, you need dark and light, and the holy worlds are extra special because there's me here below them messing up, and God can look and say, look at my angels in Atzilus, how much better they are than what's beneath them, right? I'm just a canvas, and Atzilus is the main picture on the painting. So the Alter Rebbe asked the question, maybe that's the case. What's the purpose of the Hishtalshalut, the creation of the worlds? Was it for the very higher worlds, or the very lowest world, or something else? He says, no, it wasn't for the higher worlds. Ho'il v'lahem yerida me'or panav yitvarech, ele ha'tachlit hu olam hazeh ha'tachton. Since for them, this
constitute a descent from the light of his countenance.
Go on. Rather.
Wait, I gotta find it.
Okay.
The very word world in Hebrew denotes concealment. Thus, even the highest worlds constitute, by their very existence, a descent from the pervading level of godliness that preceded their creation. It is illogical, then, to say that the revelation which these higher worlds represent is the purpose of the Hishtalshalut, since the revelation is actually concealment, and the ultimate purpose of creation lies in the revelation, not the concealment.
So rather,
the purpose of Hishtalshalut is this lowest world.
So now he lays it to rest. You'd think these holy worlds would be more important, more the point, than this physical world where so much always goes wrong. It seems to be the nature of this world that it's always going wrong. But if you look at what a spiritual world is, it's just the light coming from the Ein Sof, but degraded and lessened. It's just an infinitely less beautiful version of the divine light. And there's absolutely nothing new. It's just flowing out of the divine light. There's nothing novel about it. It's only when we get down to this lowest world that you could say something new is created, and that's darkness, free will, the sense that there's something completely independent and that God's not here. That's the new thing. So if God wanted divine light and holiness and infinity, God could have just stayed completely as it was before creation. God was the absolute essence of infinite light and everything. So it's all there. Why would God try to create more holiness and divinity by downgrading it and creating like a bad photocopy of what was already there? So all those worlds, although they seem to us to be lofty, spiritual, we want to get a glimpse of them, we want to connect with them, see how our soul vibrates in that space. Yeah, to us, they seem like that's spiritual growth. That's the point of life, is to elevate myself to higher and higher vibrations. From God's perspective, none of that matters. That's all just a bad version and then a worse version of what was already there. Nothing new. It's only here where now there's no light at all, where there's this darkness, and there now God can say, there I can have my essence. And in fact, I was there to begin with. It was a garden, and I left it when the humans messed up, as you said, with the sin in the Garden of Eden and with the calf and etc. It's there that I originally was, and then I had to leave, and now I can come back now that it's been fixed again, and I can be there in my complete essence, and that's the only place in reality I can. Yes, Noreen?
You can see why this was such an attractive philosophy to the people living in the shtetl and with the world around them and what was going on around them. It would be a very appealing philosophy.
I think
very
so.
politically correct to them. Yeah.
Well, you could say that from a sense of marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're living in a shtetl, you don't have time to learn, and you just have a few bare bones physical. You have a mitzvah you can do, and now you learn that's the purpose of reality.
Yeah.
That's a well-marketed version of Judaism.
Yeah.
But in Kabbalah, we say that the solution to a situation, always the seed of the solution is planted within the situation. So it's more than just that happened to be a good marketing tool. It's that soul, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, they were born in that generation that was going to have that sense of real deprivation and physical insecurity. And the seed for this new light of Judaism was planted in that generation really as divine providence, not just as marketing. So I take your point, but I want to put that gloss on it. How are we doing for time? Is this a good place to do a little meditation? Yeah, it's perfect. So before we do a little sit for a few minutes, any questions? This is a huge chapter, and really this is where the Alter Rebbe introduced this idea of Dira B'Tachtonim as being the purpose of creation. That's why it's all about the physical action, and we can organize our whole life around that and know that's how I was made, to struggle with my lowest aspect, not to celebrate my highest aspect. And this was a radical thing in Kabbalah and Hasidus and Judaism completely. So any questions about what we've gone over? I've got a few people watching online. Anybody online has any comments? Now, or hold your peace for the next 5 minutes? All right, so we'll pick up again on 488 when we start up. And let's just sit. If you're one of the people in a sukkah, know that you're being embraced by all this, by the Ein Sof. This is God's hugging us. And even if you're not in the sukkah, know that the sukkah is supposed to be your home, and so your home follows you wherever you are. Your home kind of goes with you. So that embrace is there, even if you're not literally in the sukkah. It's getting warm now. And let's bring our body to a nice still position. And let our breath start to flow slowly and calmly. And start our sequence of breathing in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Stay filled up. 3, 2, 1. Release the breath. 3, 2, 1. Stay empty. 3, 2, 1. Start again with an inhale. 3, 2, 1. Stay there. 2, 1. Exhaling. 3, 2, 1. Stay there. 3, 2. Continue that cycle. Let your belly get in on the breath as it opens up and swells with the in-breath. And then pulls up towards your diaphragm on the out-breath. Let's open up our wisdom gateway for the concept we've been learning. We're going to fill our mind, fill that wisdom gateway with this concept. And that wisdom gateway is the end, the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. And finally, let's introduce what we learned, that the purpose of the world is for us to create a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God in the lowest realm. And just picture in your mind, however it appears, this is our chance. God's essence can dwell here when we struggle with our lower side. And just picture that essence here in your mind, in your heart, in your physical world, certainly in the sukkah around us and all the mitzvah items we use for Sukkot. Know that God is here relaxing, being God's absolute true self, nothing veiled. Let that concept of a dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place here in the lowest realm, fill your mind, whether it be an image or an abstract concept. Let's bring any mitzvah you've done this week, any mitzvah you may do this week. Let's bring it into that concept and see that it all depends on us doing it with a little bit of heart and creating that home in our world. And let's wiggle our toes and our fingers. Open your eyes. Yashikok, everybody. Wonderful to learn this with you. It's a really gewaldige chapter. I hope I've put the ideas out there in as compact enough format to understand, because this is a big one. This is an idea that transformed the world. So for us to learn it
Food
here
for thought.
Food for thought, absolutely. So we'll sign off from Facebook and stop recording. And you can hang out if you're in the class. Hang out here.